Hey everybody, today Honey Badger has a plumbing project to do. I got to replace this expansion tank up there, that blue thing, and change out the anode rod while I've got this thing emptied out some. Uh, Last week I was replacing my son's water heater, and he has an expansion tank, and I really didn't know a whole lot about expansion tanks then, like nothing. I thought it was just an empty tank full of air. It ain't. Uh, so in replacing that, the one in my son's house, I ended up doing some research on expansion tanks, and lo and behold, they're a little more complicated than I thought. They actually have an air bladder in them that has to be pressurized up. And looking at this thing from the ground, I'm going to this around. It just looks like an empty tank to me, but when you get up here, there's a little cap on the top. And you take that little cap off. Kind of looks like what you'd see on a bike tire, right? Yep. That's where you put the air in. And on an expansion tank, you got to make sure that you have your tank pressure set to your house pressure. So I'm going to be replacing this, but I'm not going to replace it with the this is a 2-gallon unit right here, and I've got a 75-gallon water heater. Don't ask me why. We don't have shower parties or anything. My wife said she wanted a long hot shower and a big tank, so I do what the honey says. But that tank's really not big enough for this size water heater and the water pressure and temperature that we keep this thing at. So I'm going to be upgrading that one to this one over here, which is a 4.5-gallon tank. I think it's 4.5, it's either 4.5 or 5. Amtrol tank, and there's plenty of tanks out there. I chose these guys because these are made in the good old USA, so it's worth it to me to have one like this. And so that tank is noticeably bigger than this tank, and I'm going to mount it in a different location because it recommends that you actually mount the tank upside down from the sea. You'll see most on YouTube, you're going to see almost all tanks are mounted this way. Some of them I've seen mounted horizontal. That's really not the preferred way to install any of these tanks, and they probably just do it because it's easier to do it that way. You don't have to run as much plumbing. But Amtrol specifically says in a warning, that you should mount it, with the threaded area facing up. So that is what I'm going to do. I've already installed a tank hanger. I mean, when this thing's full of water, when it fails, it'll have 5 gallons of water. That Amtrol unit will. So you got to be able to support all that weight. And even when it's partially full, when it's operating normally, you got to be able to support, probably 2.5, 3 gallons of water weight. So I got this bracket at Home Depot or Lowe's or one of those big box stores. The Hold Right Quick Strap, and that's what I'm going to use to mount. I found a stud. Make sure that when you mount something like this to hold your tank, that it's perfectly vertical, because you're going to have to attach it over there to another perfectly vertical pipe. So that'll be kind of hard to do if it's, if they're not both vertical. So did that yesterday. Today I'm gonna let out the water. I got some copper pipe here, some fittings. My plan is to just kind of go up, over, and down, and I'm going to cut this pipe right here in half. I'm going to cut it right about here, and then I'm going to reuse this side on the new tank over here, and just put a couple of elbows in there, and I think I'll be good to go. The hard part will be getting everything just lined up properly. But so I'm going to go inside now and shut off the water here. And gotta shut off the cold water supply. I'm going to go inside and open up a hot water faucet, and then drain some water out of here. Got to drain that tank before I take it off. See you in a bit. Okay, I'm back. I'm going to drain about, probably 3 or 4 gallons out of the tank so I can get all that water out. Ooh, that's pretty dirty. Got a little sediment in there. Open up this relief valve, get a little more air flowing. Break that vacuum. That ought to do it. Just gonna set this outside. Okay. Now, first thing to do is twist off the old tank, and I'm just gonna set this aside. I'll take off the old tank and then I'll change out the anode rod. I think that's how I want to do it while I got a little bit of extra room. There's where the anode is. You know, real important thing to do to extend the life of your water heater is to replace that anode rod every 2 or 3 years. If you have a water softener like I do, they don't last as long. You know, have to change them more frequently, maybe every like 2.5 years or so. Might be able to get 3.5 if you don't, but they really should be, you know, checked every once in a while. And you basically do what I just did, is you relieve the pressure, let some water drain out, so we can just take this thing off and replace it. But what it does is it keeps your tank from corroding. It's called a sacrificial anode rod, and it will basically, the water will attack the rod instead of attacking your tank. And so you can extend the life of your tank significantly by changing that anode rod regularly. And also with the expansion tank, if you have a closed system that's got a backflow preventer, all that pressure whenever your water heats creates additional volume, and if you don't have a place for that to go, it's just going to go into your whole piping system. The pressure's just going to increase in your whole hot water system, up to possibly 150 psi till you open up a faucet. So that thing's really important to maintain the life of your tank and your whole system, basically all your hot water appliances and fixtures and stuff. And the anode rod is important. So I'm gonna go ahead and take the tank off, and then we'll start with the anode rod. I had this thing on pretty darn tight, so you want to make sure, if it's really tight, normally you should just be able to kind of twist it off with your hands. But if it's on really tight, make sure you use 2 wrenches. You don't want to be torquing the plumbing down below, so you want to hold that bottom one in place while you turn the top one to get it loose. Okay, so you can hear this thing gurgling as it's emptying out. So I just loosened it, create a little bit of an air gap there, and wait for all that gurgling to stop, which means it's empty, and then I can take it off without getting water everywhere. Also, I should mention the way I checked to see if this thing was bad, normally you'll hear two different sounds when you hit the air side. This is where there's an air bladder in here that inflates, and then this is where the water is, and they usually sound different. But what I did is I just started hooking up a pressure gauge up here, and water came out. So if water comes out, that means you got to replace your tank. All right, so it's not making any noise anymore. Let's see if I can take it off now. Okay, there was still some water in the tank. I guess maybe it was caught in the bladder, but I just flipped it over real quick, and you probably are never going to want to take a shower or drink water again after you see me empty this. Beautiful stuff, huh? I'm just going to let this thing drain. And there's still some water up there in the pipe, I can see, so I'm going to have to let out a little bit more in order to get the anode rod out. So I'm gonna do that, and then we'll tackle the rod next. Okay, a couple of things about anode rods before we get started pulling that one. First thing is, this is a 1 1/16 inch socket. It's what you're going to need to pull these. And one thing I might say, if you look at this, it's not very thick. That hex part of it is really not very thick. And if you're pulling off the factory one, you're probably not going to be able to do it with a socket that has a bevel on it like this, because they tighten the crap out of those things. And with this bevel here, you're not going to get a really good bite. So you might want to pay attention to that. If you're going up buying a socket, try to find one that's maybe not quite as beveled like this one here. This is the wrong size, unfortunately. But I know the other one works on my anode. But this would be more the type of socket that you'd want to get with just a smaller bevel on it, just to make sure. And if it's the factory one, you're probably going to need one of these, a breaker bar, or if you got a steel pipe or something that you can put into a smaller socket driver, then you're going to need a lot of leverage. And of course the tank's going to need to be full, otherwise you'll just be moving the tank around. There's a few different types of anode rods. You can buy magnesium or aluminum. Magnesium is going to be more expensive than aluminum, but magnesium gives up electrons better than aluminum, so it's actually better to protect your tank. They don't last as long as aluminum, so that's one choice you'll have to make. Some people say if you have a water softener, you should just use an aluminum one, because it's going to go through the process more quickly. I'm going to use a magnesium one. Also, they come in different styles. So this one right here is actually a flexible, and you can just kind of bend it at these places. So as you can see, I have a fair amount of room, but I need more than 4 feet to get an anode rod in here. And so I have a flexible one. So if you have tight space up above, you're going to have to buy probably one of these 3-piece units. So they have that type. They have this type. This is my magnesium one that I'm going to install. They have this type, and it's just got cable in between the sections. This one has 4 sections. This is for a really tight access. You probably only need, maybe 18 inches of space or so to be able to install one like this. So this end here is universal. One thing you got to watch out for is these the holes in the water heater might be accept different diameters of rod. So you can see this one is much thicker. If I hold these up to each other, maybe you can't. I don't know if you can see that or not. But this one here, this one right here is thicker than this one here that's leaning up against the tank. So that's another thing you got to be careful of. Make sure you get the right diameter anode rod for your water heater. All right, I think I've said all I can say about that. So let's get that puppy out. Okay, one more thing about the anode rod. It's always a good idea to just grab yourself a Sharpie and write down when you've replaced them. If you look at this, I had replaced one in October of 17, and by January 23rd of 21, the anode was completely gone. All I had left was this, and so that was obviously too long. That was, in that case, that was what, 3 years and 3 months maybe, or 2 months. And that anode was completely gone. So I just checked this after 2 years on January 18th, and I said maybe replace it by next January, but since I'm doing this job, I'm just going to replace it now, because this is what it looks like right now. Here, compare this to a brand new rod. Now, there's still some life left in this, but I'd rather just go ahead and replace it. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to wrap a little Teflon tape on here, and remember, when you wrap it, that you go around in this direction. You want to wrap it from where it starts all the way up to the top position, always, so that when you're tightening it, you know, if the thread goes this way and you're tightening it this way, it's not going to mess up the thread, the wrap. So I'm just going to wrap this and put her in, and we'll do a leak check once we're done with the rest of the job, the expansion tank job. Alright, next thing I'm going to do is cut this pipe off. I want to do that before I mount the tank, because I want to make sure that I got enough room to do it. Once that tank's in place, this will be hard to get to. So I'm going to just use one of these pipe cutters. And I cut it right about, let's see, halfway, about there. So you turn it tight, you rotate, tighten it up some more, just keep rotating it. I think my blade's a little dull. It's getting there. There we go. All right. I'm gonna prep that pipe. I'm gonna sand it down. I've only got 400 grit sandpaper, but you can use like Scotch-Brite or something like that, and get it sanded down to be prepped for solder. And do the same thing with the mating piece. Okay, the next step is to make sure that this tank has the right pressure in it. This particular one comes with 50 psi, but I'm running my house at 65. I already pressurized it yesterday, then I decided to make this video, so I let a little bit of air out of it, and I'm going to just repeat it again. Easy way to check these things to see if they've gone bad: just take the blunt end of a drill bit and just push down. If you get air, it's still intact. If you get water, then it needs to be replaced. Now, it may not be at the right pressure. You might have to relieve the pressure in your water heater and check the pressure and make sure it's still at your house pressure. You should probably do that once every year or so. But at least you know it's still good if air comes out of it. Otherwise, you're going to just get a bunch of water, like I did on my old one. So another nice thing about this Amtrol is they got this little valve here. On the valve stem, there's this little domed window, and what they say is that if your bladder ruptures, you're going to start seeing a discoloration in this window, and so that'll be your indication that it's failed. They still suggest that you test it periodically, but this is going to be nice, because this is in my installation. When it's properly installed, this will be pointed down, and I can see it every time I go out my garage door. I can just take a look at it and see if it's failed. So that's a nice thing about this particular Amtrol brand. So I'm just going to go ahead and hook up to my car tire inflator. And I'm going to turn it on, and I'm going to actually set it for 66 pounds. Because I'll probably get a little bit of air coming out when I disconnect it. So just set it for a little bit, a pound more. So now it's currently reading 60. I let out about 5 pounds. So let's get her going. This is a nice unit, by the way, because you can just set it and forget it. Set your pressure. When I inflate my car tires, just hook it up, set to the right pressure. I can walk away and it'll automatically shut off when it reaches the set pressure. So you don't have to stand around waiting for it to pump up like I'm doing right now, but we only got a few pounds to go, so just let her keep on going. There we go. So we'll just take it off as quickly as we can. And we put the cap back on. So if you don't know how to check your house pressure, all you really need is one of these water pressure gauges, and just go outside and hook it up to your hose bib. Make sure it's tight, there's no water leaking around it. Make sure nobody's using any water in the house, and you should get a static pressure reading in your piping system. So we're ready to install this tank so that we can figure out where the piping goes. This tank can only be in one particular position. You see there's a little ridge here. This little ridge here where they have the seam, and that ridge is going to, there's a little notch here, and that's where that ridge is supposed to go. So when you tighten it up, it's kind of holding it into one fixed position. So that's what I'm going to have to do. And I'm just going to go ahead and get that in position. You don't need to see me do this. It's just a matter of tightening up these bands. Okay, this unit is strapped in place. A little side to side, but it's definitely not going to get pulled down. One thing I forgot to mention about this particular model is it comes with this little plastic piece, and this was actually not in the nipple when I got it in the box, and I didn't think anything about it. I thought maybe, oh, it was something to protect the thing during shipping, so I threw it out. And then I read the instructions, and it says it's called a turbolator, and just said to stick it inside this nipple here. I don't know what it does, but I dug it out of the trash and put it in here. Probably works just fine without it, but anyway, just so you know. So now next I'm gonna thread this, or put some Teflon tape on here, and I'm gonna thread this up about as tight as I would normally have it, so I get it at the right height, and then I'll be able to figure out the plumbing from here to there. Okay, I'm going to dry fit all these pipes, and I've already got a coupling fitted on here and an elbow fitted on here. See, they're just basically loose. So the next thing I got to figure out is what is the height of this pipe going to be to the elbow. So I'm going to try to get a pretty good guess here by holding this at the bottom, or excuse me, at the top of where the pipe goes in, as far as it fits in. And actually, you know what? It's kind of dumb. Let's just take that off and do it this way. There we go. And then measure from about halfway down here, and then we'll get this level. It's level, and about halfway down. So that is 5 5/8 inches is how long that pipe should be. 5.5 to 5 5/8 I think would work. I'm gonna go with 5 5/8. Back in a minute. Okay, let's see how we did. It's off by maybe a 1/16 too long, but I think that'll work. I'm gonna keep going. We put this piece on here, and this piece on here, and we'll measure that distance in between. Actually, the distance to fully seat the pipe, which is a little longer, so that's going to be 11.5 inches. No, sorry, 11 3/4 inches. Next piece. Okay, this pipe's cut. Well, let's just see how well she fits. That's pretty darn good. All right, so that is what the piping is going to look like, and the next thing I'm going to do is take that whole assembly off, because I really don't want to do all the soldering up here and do it on the bench. Okay, I got my assembly finished. One little thing, I mean, if you want to learn how to solder, there's plenty of YouTube videos out there. One little tip that I would mention is, I wanted to make sure both of these were parallel with each other. One of them's not facing out this way and straight up, so that everything goes together nicely. So I soldered this elbow first. I got this one fluxed, and then I set this level on top of both elbows, and I rotated this one until they were both sitting flat on this straight surface. So once they were both sitting on there, seated against this, then I know that they're perfectly aligned, and you can just finish up the whole assembly on both sides after that. So now it's time to put it in. Okay, I got the piping in place. It was a little bit off. That top pipe could have been maybe I don't know, 3/16 of an inch longer, but it still all fits. I ended up dropping this and then putting that in there after I got the pipe flux and everything ready. Dropped that down, slid it over, hooked up the pipe, the tank, rotated it up till it was tight again, strapped it, and now everything's in place the way I want it. So now I'm just gonna solder that connection there, and I'll be ready to do a leak test. Okay. Alright, all the connections are made, everything's cooled down, and now it's time to see how badly I suck at soldering. I've still got the faucet open inside. Gotta let the air get out of the system. So we're just gonna open this guy up. Start filling her up. one side. See that the water's running. I'm getting all the air out. Good. Outside, see if we're spraying water everywhere. Full open. No leaks. Check the anode rod. No leaks at the anode rod. All is well at the Honey Badger household. So I hope this helped you if you need to do your own expansion tank job or anode rod job. Thanks for watching.